Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Ostrom. I work with the City of Ottawa and the Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development team. Today, we're going to be talking about 5725 Fernbank Road. Just before we get started and before I pass it on to our moderator, just want to go over a few things. Tonight, we'll be using Zoom, so thank you for joining us on this session. Normally, we would do these in person, but we have to move it to digital due to our current situation. In the chat function, I just shared a check mark at sign in and comment sheet. Please make sure to go in and sign in and leave any comments that you wish. It is important that you do this so that your comments are officially submitted to the file. Also, we can circulate additional information if you submit your contact information. Only the planner will be getting this information, so you can be confident that your information will be safe. Just some quick Zoom participation protocols. As you know, we run our virtual meetings by Zoom, and it's nice to see people becoming more and more comfortable with this platform. We are trying to facilitate these meetings virtually as though we would be if they were in person. Just a few protocols to help you along the night. All participants are automatically on mute during the presentation. If you wish to speak during the Q&A session, please raise your hand and electronically we'll be able to get to you. If you hit the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, the raise hand function is in there. We will then ask to unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak, and you don't need to click the unmute button. Now I'm going to pass it on to our moderator for the evening, Andy Reside.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. Hello, everybody. My name is Andy Reside. I'm a strategic support coordinator with the Planning, Infrastructure, Economic Development Department with the City of Ottawa. Bonjour, mon nom est Andy Reside. Je suis un adjoint stratégique avec la Ville d'Ottawa. And tonight we are here for the Plan of Subdivision statutory public meeting for 5725 Fernbank Road. Next slide, please, Mike. I'll do so. Just before I introduce everyone, I'm just going to do land acknowledgement for our host nation. Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe host nation. The peoples of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe host nation have lived in this territory for millennia. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Ottawa's Indigenous community is diverse, representing many nations, languages, and customs. The city honors the land of the First Peoples, as well as the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in Ottawa, and their valuable past and present contributions to the land. And following that, I'll do some quick introductions on who's here tonight. The ward councillor, Councillor Gower, is here. He's on the screen there. Thank you, Councillor. We have the lead planner on the file, Kathy Rigas. She is right there. Thank you, Kathy. With the applicant, we have Vincent Denham from Claridge Homes. And also with him is Ben Pascolo-Neveu. He's the transportation consultant from IBI Group. We have some other staff on the line as well. We have Randolph Wang from from Urban Design as well, in case there's any questions on the urban design side. Next slide, please, Mike. And for the agenda, it's a quick agenda, and then we'll get to the question and answer period. So it'll start with opening remarks from your councillor. Then Kathy will talk about the planning process. Vincent from Claridge will talk about the development proposal, and then we'll hop into the question and answer period. And then Councillor Gower will give some closing remarks. And with that, I will pass it over to Councillor Gower for opening remarks.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy. I want to first of all say thank you to all the residents who are joining us today for the meeting. It's really important that residents get involved to stay informed in what's happening in the community, and also in these meetings to share your feedback, to ask questions, and hopefully this will be a good opportunity to get answers for you. And I just wanted to mention as well that I will be recording this and sharing it on my YouTube channel so that it's there as an archive, because for people who couldn't attend tonight, or if you wanted to go back for reference, you'll be able to see that later on. I was just thinking a bit about this particular proposal. It's quite a large one. It is 600 homes, and we've had almost no feedback from the community, which is actually pretty unusual for any development, especially such a large one. it is, I was thinking about just how long the planning process is for land like this. You'll probably hear later on in the call, I mean, the whole Fernbank area, the planning and the development is governed by a Fernbank Community Design Plan that was originally introduced, I believe, in 2009. So here we are 12 years later, and one of the last phases of the development is going through the approval process. And there's still quite a bit of process along the way to make sure that this develops in the way that the city would like it to. Anyhow, I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions as we get later on into the meeting, and looking forward to hearing the presentation today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, I will ask Mike to switch, and I'll pass it over to Kathy for the planning process. Kathy.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Kathy Rigas. So I'm the planner in the Development Review West team who's handling this particular subdivision application. So we have a plan of subdivision and a rezoning application for these lands. So because this is a statutory public meeting, there's a notice I have to read. This is a statutory public meeting for a plan of subdivision within the City of Ottawa as required to be held under Section 5120B of the Planning Act. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the City of Ottawa with respect to this application, you must make a written request to me, Kathy Rigas, at the City of Ottawa, Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department, 110 Laurier Avenue West, Ottawa. So that is just to let you know that if you would like to receive further notifications about this subdivision, you can, although it gives the full mailing address and postal code, you feel free to just drop me an email, and I can keep you informed of any future decisions on this application. Next slide, please. So first I'll just do a quick overview of what is a plan of subdivision. So a subdivision is the application that divides a large parcel into the lots and blocks for development. It also creates the new streets, and apart from the lots or blocks that will be developed with houses, it also creates any walkway blocks, park blocks. There might be commercial blocks. There might be a block for stormwater management pond, for schools, and different uses. So through this plan of subdivision, we establish a layout. And what's called draft approval is the process that gives a high level approval to the plan of subdivision. So along with a general layout showing the streets, the lots, the blocks, if there's a school, where that would be, if there's a park, where that would be, where any pathway blocks are, everything is established on this plan. And that goes together with what's called a suite of draft plan conditions. And that is a whole series of conditions that the developer has to fulfill before they get the final approval. So that involves items such as the detailed engineering, like servicing, grading, stormwater management plans for the development, streetscape plans with, where all the trees are in the entire subdivision. It also includes clearances from different outside agencies. There may be requirements for the utilities such as Rogers, Bell, Hydro. There might be conservation authority conditions. They have to provide financial requirements. So we collect a sizable, what's essentially a performance deposit for the value of all the works that will be done. So we collect that in advance. There's also, it generates a subdivision agreement at the end of the process. So our legal department prepares an agreement that basically ties the developer to everything that has been agreed on so far in terms of all the detailed plans, the financial commitments. Everything is laid out in that agreement, and that's executed by both the developer and the city, and that remains registered on title. So everything that pertains to the subdivision is recognized in that agreement. So next slide, please. So this shows the property. It's 5725 Fernbank Road, and it's located at the west corner of Fernbank Road, which is the south boundary of the site, and Robert Grant Avenue, which would be the easterly boundary. So the site is outlined in red. There is a parcel that's shown the treed in green where the red line wraps around it. So that is a parcel that is in a separate ownership. So it's not part of this subdivision application. So in terms of the surrounding land uses, on the east side of Robert Grant is a mix of different residential uses. There's singles, towns, low-rise apartments. The little chunk that is still shown in green on the north side of Fernbank Road, that will be a future park and ride facility at the time that we have a bus rapid transit route on Robert Grant Avenue. And to the north of the site is the Westwood subdivision. So phase 1 is the part that is now partially occupied and under construction, so generally north of Cope. And the green rectangle that you see north of this property, that's the future Stittsville High School site. So they have received site plan approval, and that should be under construction very shortly. And the area that you see just sort of in gray, that's Westwood phase 2. So that has gone through the various approvals and is being serviced now. And to the west, that's also future CRT owned land that will be subject to a new plan of subdivision at some time in the future. And then to the south, Fernbank serves as what's called the urban boundary. So the land south of Fernbank is not considered urban land. It's not in the urban boundary and doesn't permit urban types of subdivision such as we're dealing with. That is all in the rural area and will remain in that state. Next slide, please. Excuse me, this shows the official plan. So the official plan is the city's high-level overarching document that guides development. And the all the yellow area, that's what's called general urban area. So that allows a whole range of uses. It permits all types of residential, from detached single-family dwelling right up to high-rise apartment. And it also allows commercial, institutional, parks. It allows basically a whole range of uses. So the site is shown with the blue star. It's in the middle of a general urban area. The red dots that you see, that indicates what's called an arterial main street. So that's applicable to a segment of Robert Grant that's north of this site, near the intersection of Abbott, where it was called Arterial Main Street. And that area is intended for higher density development. And the green are different types of open space. Next slide, please. So this is the Fernbank Community Design Plan. So the Fernbank Community Design Plan was a guiding document for this area that was approved by City Council in 2009. So it established a framework that, although there's many different landowners within the Fernbank community, they all have to work together in terms of achieving this general overall land use layout. It established where the various schools would be, where the parks would be, what the street layout was. So all of that groundwork was laid before any particular owner came in with their own subdivision application. So as you can see by the red star, this parcel is located at the very south end, sort of midway in terms of east to west, just west of Robert Grant Avenue. So the light colored, sort of light beigey, that stands for low density residential. It was intended that there be more medium, slightly higher density all along Robert Grant. And then the blocks that are brown, that was a mixed use. And then the schools are shown in sort of lavender, and the parks and open space in green. So the proposal we're looking at now is very much in keeping with what was intended in terms of the layout and just what we intended to see in this particular segment of the community. Next slide, please. Sorry, just a second. All right, so this just shows the transportation master plan for the Fernbank community. So it established where the roads would be, because at the time this document was approved in 2009, there was basically nothing here. So the road that you see sort of in purple running north-south through the middle of the community, that is Robert Grant Avenue. So Robert Grant is an arterial road that will eventually extend all the way up to Palladium Drive. So that's meant to be the main arterial through the community, carry the highest volume of traffic. And the collector roads are shown in purple. So the site again is indicated with the red star, and you see Cope Drive, which is the purple one running east-west. That's a little bit north of this site. The high school will be at the corner of Robert Grant and Cope. And then the blue dotted line that you see on the to the west, that will be an extension of Gold Hawk Drive. And then this just shows what the main roads were through the community. Next slide, please. So this shows the zoning map, or an excerpt of the zoning map for this area. So the subdivision lands are shown in pink, and they are zoned, the code is DR. So DR stands for Development Reserve Zone, and that essentially doesn't allow anything. It only allows uses that don't preclude development. And so this was a zone that was applied back before the Fernbank Community Design Plan was done, and it simply means the land has to be rezoned according to what the subdivision is proposing. So as you can see on the lands surrounding it, they've been zoned according to what their use will be. So the one that is to the north, I1B, that's the school site. I stands for institutional, and then /R1Z means it's dual zoned. If the school was not going to happen, it could be developed for residential purposes. And the parcel to the left of that, R3Z, that's a common zone that's used in Fernbank. It allows detached homes, semi-detached, and townhouses. So that's the zone that's requested for most of this area. And then O1 to the left, that's applicable to the storm pond. That stands for parks and open space. Next slide, please. So what zoning changes are requested? So as I mentioned, we have a subdivision application to create the lots, blocks, and streets. We also have a zoning application to change the zoning of the parcel from the DR zone to residential third density, the R3Z, that will permit detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings. And then there will also be a park block. And so that one would be zoned open space. So the subdivision is proposing approximately 600 dwelling units. So there'll be a mix of about 205 detached, 260 townhouses, and 130 back-to-backs. And they would all be permitted within this R3Z zone. And as we get later in the subdivision process, it will be divided into the lots for single family and the blocks for townhouses. Next slide, please. So that's it for the process and just an overview, and I'll let Vincent present the specifics of the proposal.
Thanks, Kathy. That was great. Basically, did a great run through of what the project was. So my name is Vincent Deneme. I work for Claridge Homes, and I'm representing CRT Developments for this meeting. So CRT stands for Claridge Ridgecraft Tamarack. So this is a co-tenancy development where we're the developer and we sell lots to those two other developers as well as ourselves. So you'll see a mix of three developers building homes here. Somewhat rationalizes the volume in units because we're all getting a share. So when you break it down, we're all getting a reasonably sized project, but total it is a big project. So next slide. So this is just to show the overall big picture of the CRT ownership. So on the left is phase 1 and 2. It's a bit of our marketing map. So phase 1 being everything north of Cope Drive, including the school site. It's a mix of singles and towns. There's 2 parks, and then there's some future residential that's a bit higher density on Robert Grant. And then phase 2, which was just an extension of the draft plan approved back in 2011, which is just more single family homes, townhomes. And then no parks is more of a smaller phase. On the right, you see the overall ownership of CRT. So in blue, phase 3 at the bottom there is what we're discussing today, is what we've applied for draft plan approval. It's a mix of towns, singles, and back-to-back units, which you'll see in some later slides what they look like. So like Kathy said, 260 townhomes, 206 single family detached dwellings, and then 130 back-to-back units. This phase is going to include a park, which is roughly 1.3 hectares in size. So pretty big park, lots of amenities. There's a fit plan also in some later slides. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is our draft plan, just kind of a snapshot of what we've applied with. So the future school into the north, our phase in red, and then there's another developer that has a piece kind of sandwiched in that's also proposing similar housing typology, so townhomes and single family homes. So much of the same, basically just a normal continuation of the project from the north. Next slide. So this is the fit plan that was part of the Fernbank CDP that our consultants did. So this is basically just a very rough draft of what the city and our consultants came up with for the proposed park in this phase. So a mini soccer field, a half-court basketball, a little play area, a shelter, a puddle rink, and some pathways and open space. This will evolve over time, and it will have its own public consultation process. So look out for that. We've just started, but we like to build our parks in conjunction with our subdivisions. It's nice to have that day one. Next slide. So these are just conceptual images of the homes we build at Claridge. And then there's also Ridgecraft and Tamarack, who build similar homes. They all kind of fit within the zoning, so we're all kind of stuck with the built form that the city imposes. But this is our renderings for Claridge. And then I forgot about Ridgecraft and Tamarack, but you can go on their website and they have pictures that you can see. Next slide. These are back-to-back dwellings, a bit more denser. So it's basically a townhome that's 3 stories sandwiched together. So they don't have backyards. They'll just both have streets fronting with a garage and a patio. So here you'll see there's 4 units on one side, and then there'll be another 4 units mirrored on the back side. So one block would have 8 units. So double the typical amount of units than a townhome. Next slide. And then this is just our regular street townhomes that are roughly 20 feet wide, have a backyard, and seen around the city. Next slide. I think that's might be it. Yeah. So thanks, and I'm open for any questions.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So in terms of what happens next with the subdivision, we'll continue to gather public comments. Any issues will be resolved, and then the draft plan and the conditions of approval will be finalized. And then I prepare a staff report, what's called delegated authority report, recommending approval. And the report and the suite of conditions is approved by the manager of development review. And before they approve it, we obtain concurrence from the councillor with the conditions of approval. And then notice of decision is sent to anyone who provided comments. Next slide, please. And then parallel to the subdivision process is the rezoning. So the 2 applications were circulated together so that anyone who received notice knew that there was both a rezoning and subdivision. So again, we're gathering public comments. And after the subdivision has received draft approval, I will prepare a rezoning report that is considered by planning committee, where we make a recommendation regarding the rezoning. So planning committee considers that staff report, and if they approve it, it goes on to council, and city council enacts a bylaw which changes the zoning from the DR zone to the R3 and parks and open space. And then following the council enactment, a notice of passing is circulated. So that would be mailed to all owners within 120-meter radius of the site, plus anyone else who provided comments or attended this meeting and signed in. And then following the 20-day appeal period, assuming there are no objections, the bylaw comes into effect. So that's what happens next. So next slide, please. So that covers everything. So I'll let Andy moderate the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy and Vincent. Very much appreciated. And now we will turn to the question and answer period. And Mike, if you just take the screen down. And so for this portion, as Mike had explained before, we do use the raise hand function. So if you need to know where to raise your hand, it's under the reactions button at raise hand. As well, the chat is open to send questions just to myself. So if you prefer to ask questions that way, you can send your questions in the chat to _Andy Reside, and I'll ask those questions of whoever you want. As well, your questions can be asked and answered in the language of your choice to the best of our abilities. We do have bilingual representation here. And as well, Mike will put the comment cards and comment card and sign in sheet link in the chat again before the end of this meeting. So if you don't get to ask your question now or wish to add comments later, you can do so through that function. So if there are any questions, now's your chance. Please go ahead and raise your hand or type in your question, and Kathy and Vincent would be happy to answer. Oh, well, the counselor is going to ask a question. Go ahead, counselor. Oh, I guess I got to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, well, I hope residents will have questions too, but while we're waiting, I wanted to ask if this plan of subdivision will trigger any upgrades to the segment of Fernbank Road that it's up against.
I can answer that.
Go ahead, Kathy.
No, it doesn't. Fernbank Road is the city's responsibility. So none of the individual subdividers that have subdivisions that are abutting Fernbank Road, none of them are responsible for upgrading Fernbank Road. So that will be up to the city to do the work when we collect sufficient development charges to do the work ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kathy. And now I do not see any more hands in the participants that are up or any questions in the chat. Oh, okay. So I got one question in the chat. We're excited now. When is Robert Grant Avenue going to be extended to Hazeldean? Kathy, do we know that yet?
Not for sure. Again, okay. The city has responsibility for arterial roads. It's not a subdivider obligation the way the other streets are. So that, for example, CRT will have to construct all the streets within their subdivision, and different segments of COPE were built by the subdividers, you know, as they moved along. But Robert Grant, as an arterial road, it's the city's responsibility. So the part that's north of Abbott is in a subdivision that is called Kizzle Management is the name of the owner. The statutory public meeting for that subdivision, I held that in January. So they're a little bit ahead of this one. And that developer has I'll say the opportunity, because it's not an obligation, that if they want to build the road sooner than the city would, and I think right now it's in the city's budget to be built around 2025, but if they wanted to build it sooner, they can request that and they would be paid back in the year that we would have built it. So that's something that may or may not happen. But, you know, at this point, I can't give a definite date, but it may be in the, you know, 2025 range. And it does take approximately 3 years. So even if they decided to build it, that it takes at least a year of detailed design to get it through the approval process, and then 2 construction seasons.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. I believe Councillor Gower would like to add on to that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Just echoing what Kathy said. So the specific question was, when will Robert Grant be built from Abbott to Hazeldean? I'll first of all say it should have been already built by now. Originally, when the Fernbank community was designed, I think that segment would have been built probably by this time based on the number of homes. There are delays, and we could take half an hour talking about why that is. Getting Robert Grant completed all the way from Fernbank to the Queensway is one of my big priorities, and we've made a little bit of progress over the past couple of years, and we'll continue to do that. Kathy mentioned that the Cazelle lands is the land between Hazeldean and Abbott, so that will be the next phase. At the very latest, the city would fund it by 2025, 2026. I'm hopeful that, as Kathy mentioned, we can use what's called front ending, and we can have the builder advance that construction sooner than that time frame. The next question is, when does Robert Grant get completed from Hazeldean all the way up to the Queensway and Palladium Drive? Well, the very northernmost stub closest to Palladium Drive is actually under construction now, but it's a very short stub. The rest of it currently is being funded 2028 to 2029, so quite a ways away. But like I said, we're working to try to find a way to move that up in the city's priority list and to get it funded and built as soon as possible. The last thing I'll say on this is over the next 2 to 3 years, the city is going through an update of the transportation master plan, which is the planning document that sets the priorities for roads, when they get built and what's the priority, roads and transit and other modes of transportation. I've been sharing information on my website and email newsletter whenever there's an opportunity for public feedback. And it's really important that residents let city staff know by filling out surveys, by sending in comments when there's opportunities, to let the city staff know how important roads like Robert Grant, Fernbank, Terry Fox, Maple Grove, Carp Road, how important these are to the community. It certainly helps me advocate on behalf of the community when there's a lot of residents who are participating in the feedback process.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And actually, I'm going to throw the link up for the Transportation Master Plan into the chat. So if anyone wants to take that away, that is something that will be coming underway quickly after the official plan is complete. Thank you, Councillor. I have another question in the chat, and I believe this will be for Vincent. And Vincent, what would be the timeline of when this project would start the building phase?
Thanks, Andy. So right now we're pretty early in the planning process, so we still have to get draft approval and go through detailed design. We're hopeful that we can maybe start in the fall for underground deep services and work through the winter, and then be ready for summer 2022 for building permits and housing construction.
Okay, great. Thank you. And yes, to the participant who joined late, I will. You will be able to provide comments afterwards, and if you sign in, the planner will be able to send you any updates that happened on this file. Another question: when CRT Phase 1 is expected to finish? CRT, Kathy, can you enlighten me?
I think I'll let Vincent answer that. CRT is the development partnership, and that's been underway for a couple of years now, but I'll let Vincent talk about when it might be finished.
Yeah, so I can only speak to our Claridge's portion of the housing construction. So we've got roughly 25 single family homes left to build, no more townhomes. And then the other builders I think are a bit behind, but we're gonna see probably the full build out latest next year. Then there's going to be some multi-residential blocks on the, let's say, east side of the project, so west of Robert Grant. That's going to be some walk-up style apartments that are going to be built there that are part of phase 1. We're calling it phase 1B. And then the community park on the southwest side, that will be hopefully built this summer as well. And I think that would be it. Yeah. So latest next year.
Great. Thank you, Vincent. Okay. And the counselor has another question. So go ahead, counselor.
Yeah, I have another question about transportation. I was wondering if we could get some information about what we could expect for the street design in terms of sidewalks, in terms of bicycle pathways, in terms of traffic calming. I know some of those are a little outside of the plan of subdivision process, but I think it'd be useful to get an idea of what we could anticipate in this kind of development.
Yeah, so I can take that. So for the, I guess the road design plans, they're not required for draft approval, but we've been, I guess, encouraged to do it early in the design. So we're actually working through that right now. I've got Ben here on with IBI that can maybe answer some specifics, but we know that there's going to be a sidewalk on one side on all local roads. There's going to be sidewalks on both sides on collectors and minor collectors. There will be no, I guess, segregated bike facilities in this subdivision, but there is a multi-use pathway on Robert Grant to get you from, I guess, the broader area. And as far as traffic calming, we are suggesting some bulb outs at intersections on collector roads where the local roads meet, and some bulb outs here and there in the subdivision. I'm not sure if I missed something, Ben, but.
Yeah, no, that's pretty well I'd just like to add to that in terms of traffic calming measures along the Collector Road, Gold Hawk Drive. They would consist of bulb outs and not vertical traffic calming measures like speed humps. As we're anticipating that transit service is going to be provided along that Collector Road, and we don't want to cause any delays through measures like that. So, but other than that, bulb outs along Gold Hawk and Street 1, which is going to connect up to Robert Grant Avenue opposite Halliburton Heights. So those two long straight sections would have traffic calming along them.
Great,
Okay, thank you. I'll note that, just for residents here, one thing that we've been able to accomplish with, I think, most of the new subdivisions being built over the last year or two is to achieve traffic calm neighborhoods from the get-go. So we're aiming usually at a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on local streets, but actually designing the road so that cars drive slowly. It's one of my pet peeves as a counselor is for some of the subdivisions that were approved a few years ago and are just coming on board now, almost immediately when people move in, we start to get emails about speeding, about missed stop signs and things like that. And then we have to go in and try to retrofit those with radar boards and with flex stakes. In my opinion, we should be getting it right from the get-go and designing streets to discourage speeding right from the start. So that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to accomplish with this subdivision as well. And it's a good way to ensure safety for parents and kids and everyone who's out walking and biking through the community.
Great, thank you all. I do have one point of clarification, Vincent, maybe you can help out. Are all these phases 1 to 4 all considered part of the Westwood community?
Yeah. So we're most likely just going to continue the marketing name Westwood throughout the entire property from Robert Grant to not quite Shea Road, but close to it. Or no, that would be Shea Road.
Yeah.
Great. And so I have no more hands up and I have no more questions in the chat. I will give it 1 more minute and then I will toss it over to the counselor for some closing remarks. Oh, we'll talk about, sorry, I believe we have some closing remarks and then how you can still keep connected with us. So one more round if there's anybody who has a lingering question. And I see nothing, and I'm going to ask Mike just to make sure that he's received nothing in his chat so we can.
Nothing on my end.
Thanks, Mike. And so if you could throw back up the how you can connect with us, and Councillor Gower, if you wish, for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. I don't have too much to say. I appreciate residents who've attended. I know we had a few folks join us a little bit later. I mentioned at the start that I am going to post this to my YouTube channel. So if you go to glengower.ca, you'll be able to find this probably within a couple hours, linked from the page. If you go to YouTube and search for Councillor Glenn, you'll be able to find eventually this meeting and all the previous development applications as well. And I always provide updates through my email newsletter. So if you go to glengower.ca, you'll also see a link where you can sign up for my email newsletter if you don't already receive that. We have a lot of development happening in Stittsville. I think we have at least one development meeting like this every week for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So there's a huge demand for housing, and a lot of people who want to move to Stittsville and Canada area. So we're seeing that reflected in a lot of development applications coming in. Thank you to Vincent and your team from CRT. Thank you to Kathy, city planner, and thank you to Andy and Mike, also from the city's planning department. I also want to say thank you to Jordan Moffat from my team for being in the background here tonight, and hope everybody has a good evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And again, thank you all for attending. Be well, be safe, and stay at home.